mobile devices. And also, council, if you would, turn your mics on, please, at the dais. You got green lights? Everybody's got green lights? All right, we're going to call to order the special city council meeting and workshop for Tuesday, January the 7th of 2025 at 4 p.m. City Council Chambers, 201 East Nash Street, Terrell, Texas. Have with us on the dais District 2, Donna Renee Anderson. District 3, Mayor Ronnie Velasquez. The mayor's here, so we have a quorum, but not here, but on their way is District 4, Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Mayor Pro Tem, and District 5, Phil Robinson, who's our Deputy Mayor Pro Tem. If you would, Mike, please lead us in invocation, and if everyone would remain standing for the pledges.
Dear Lord, you're a great and loving God. We have only you, because you are our Creator and our Savior. We ask that you would help us to follow in a path of wisdom that you lay out for us. We know that you've got a vision for Terrell, and you've got unity in mind for Terrell. Pray, dear Lord, that you'd give all of us wisdom as we serve you and we serve the city. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right, our next item on the agenda is to hear remarks from visitors. However, I'm going to delay that for just a moment because I think it's important for the whole council to be here when Deborah speaks. So we do have a former council member, Deborah Kelly, with us in the audience. Thank you for being here today. She and I sat to the right of the mayor, Henry Madrick, and then a little bit for Francis Sanders. And she was a very good councilwoman, and we appreciate her service to the city of Terrell. So we'll come back to that. Is there, without objection, is there any objection to suspending the rules and coming back? None? Next item is a discussion item. This is about affordable housing, but also I think we need the full council as well. So can I have a motion to recess for 5 minutes, please?
I make a move that we recess for 5 minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is any further discussion? All those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
We are in recess for 5 minutes. This time, we will reconvene into regular session and consider action, if any. There are none. This time is to hear remarks from visitors. We do have a visitor with us this evening, a former council member, Deborah Kelly. If you would, please come forward to the podium and for the record, just state your name and address, please. And Deborah's used to being on the other side.
It's okay.
Good on P and Z too, I gotta tell you, Mayor, I've been there.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Kelly. My address is 100 North Canton, here in Terrell. Okay. Well, I'm also a member on the P and Z, and you guys know there was an issue that was brought before us regarding decreasing the size of livable space of single-family housing. And we were kind of torn with that, because I know the word affordable keeps getting thrown around, but those days of $150,000 houses, $200,000 are over unless you build one yourself. So with that being said, so I won't just ramble a little bit. Let me just stick to my script, and then I'll go back to what else I want to say, okay? I'm standing before you to request that you do not make any changes to the residential building standards. I understand that some of you have indicated a desire to decrease the square footage of homes built on small infill lots to create affordable housing. This is laudable goal, and I do not oppose affordable housing. However, I do not agree that the blanket approach to modifying the livable space size is the correct approach. A blanket approach through an ordinance change across the board will result in unintended consequences that would negatively impact the current diversity of our neighborhoods. This change will allow get-rich-quick developers and builders to build cheap, shoddy, and possibly toxic housing all over the city, with the majority of them being built in South Terrell. There are few, if any, deterrents for large corporations or individual investors from buying large amounts of property to rent. Corporate landlords seek to dominate the neighborhoods they target, simultaneously reducing the inventory of houses to buy while expanding the stock of houses to rent. Who can compete with a cash offer? Affordable housing will have the opposite impact, as there is no way a developer or builder is going to take on the expense to buy, build, and then offer houses at a price lower than current rent and mortgages. Additionally, by adding smaller houses in neighborhoods, you, the council, have attempted to revitalize with runoff families, as the houses would simply be too small. Decreasing the size of houses would lure developers and builders to the very areas that are struggling with residual effects of past discriminating housing patterns. With this knowledge, it should not come as a surprise to understand why these areas contain most of the region's affordable housing. The city is fully aware that most of the residents in low-income housing, AKA affordable housing, are people of color. When that housing now being hyper-incentivized to be only built in predominantly Black communities, that has the effect of dictating where the less advantaged will live. So with that being said, I have a few pictures I'd like to show you. I live in the Stallings Addition area. Would you please? I live in the Stallings Addition area. You, the council, have allowed this builder to come to our area and build some, they look like little shotgun houses. He started out with adding a garage to it, a single garage. Came before you guys again, and now you guys are telling him he has to do 2-car garages, which has made it a little bit better. But that first picture, that's supposed to be an affordable house. It's on the market right now. When he sold that, $235,000. The mortgage payment, $2,000. What's affordable about that? 4 houses right there on that, in that same little area, built by that builder. That first one, that white one, is only 1,292 square feet. And the one next to it is a little bit larger, and then the one next to it is a little bit smaller. And it goes on with that same type of style house. 22 houses are built in our area right now. He's getting ready to build 2 more on Chapel Street. And the next picture just gives you a close-up of those houses. See how small they are, and they are tiny. 1,600 square feet, what we have now, is not a large house. My daughter currently lives in one. 1,600, I mean, you're not like talking about a mansion. I mean, that's a nice size for any single family. And you see the rest of the houses? They all look the same, and they are scattered throughout the Stallings Addition area. 4 of those houses now currently up for sale. Most of those houses are being rent. Just because you have affordable housing does not mean one person can afford to pass the requirements to obtain a house. You got to be able to get a loan. A lot of people cannot. And I know that you, Ms. Thomas, try to do what you can with the people in our community, making them affordable. But with that being said, you don't have the resources to maintain them properly because you're not charging the amount that needs to be charged because they can't afford to pay it. And these are the people that Ms. Thomas accepts, or the people that have been rejected from the apartments. They can't get apartments because they have criminal records. So she's stuck with them because she doesn't want them homeless, but she doesn't charge them a lot of rent, so her housing is not the best. So I'm just saying, when we say that term affordable housing, we just should not decrease that. We're supposed to be progressive now. You guys, this is 2025. Houses with carports, people are not utilizing carports. My house is old, but I have a carport. But they're not even keeping their garages clean. At least we can close the doors to the garage. But who wants to be at a house where you see all that junk in a car, housed in a carport? We do not want that. I spoke with a lot of people when I brought this subject to mind, and I really? Is this something that we want to go back to? That sounds like 1970. A carport and 1,100 square foot house. This is 2025. Please don't do that to us. We're looking at bigger and better things. We don't want to go backwards. If you see that last house, this little greenhouse, that house is 800 and something square feet. This young lady pays $1,150 for that little bitty house. That's ridiculous. She's a single mom, divorced mom with 1 child, paying that for this tiny house in Stallings Addition. That's absolutely outrageous. And you think just because you decrease the size that developers and builders are going to give you $500-600 rent like Ms. Thomas is doing? That's not gonna happen. So let's not change it for them. This is the last house in the picture. This is what we want. This is what is being built right now in our area. We want something that we can be proud of. The last house is a newly built, is it? 1,600 square feet, livable space with 2-car garage. We do not want to go backwards. Please do not go backwards. The days of $500-600 over. I mean, unless you're gonna go, I don't know where you can go and find that. I really, truly don't. But for you to just decide to do that for the entire community, I think that's being really something that need to be thought about, because you need to see who it's going to impact. And you already know most of the infill lots are District 2 and District 3. I can tell you, if you try to put any of those little tiny houses in District 5, we have a room full of people. They would not want it, and I don't want it. I may not live in District 5, but I don't want that in my city anymore. 2025, let's do better. Let's think about all of Terrell, not just South Terrell, North Terrell. We need to do better. And that going backwards with carports and small houses, no. People want tiny houses. They have rural areas that still allow you to go get those little tiny houses that they sell at Fair Park. You can get one of those and pull one out there, add your carport, but we don't want it in our city limits. That's just not something that will make Terrell look its best, especially if we're being progressive. That's just not something that I don't want to see, and a lot of millennials don't want to see. A lot of our millennials do not live in South Terrell for that reason. Most of them are now living in North Terrell because South Terrell did not have any houses that looked up to par for those college-educated kids, and my daughter being one of them. She would not, because it just did not satisfy her. So she lives North Terrell, and I don't blame her, because she wants to be, when her friends come, she wants a house and a community that she can be proud of, and not something to be embarrassed by. And unfortunately, a lot of our areas in South Terrell is embarrassing because of that. We still have shotgun houses and unkept property and all of that, and we don't want that anymore. We want to look better, and we want to do better. So I feel that legislative approach that works toward meeting the needs of the people, not developers or builders, will lead to a stronger city and have a long-lasting positive effects on those who live and will choose to live here. And that's what I want, for people to continue to want to live in our city and not be ashamed of the city of Terrell building shotgun houses. 2025, no. We want them here in our city to help make this a better place. That's what we want. That's what I want. And I'm sorry that they're not here to voice their opinions, but I'm speaking for them. All the folks that I talk with wanted things to look better and want us to do better. And that's what I want. And I pray that you guys will want the same thing. That's my take on it.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is we don't have anyone else? No? Okay. Next item on the agenda is discussion. Discuss affordable housing. This is going to be handled by our city manager, Mike Sims.
Okay, I'm going to, in keeping with our workshop format tonight, I'm just going to present from here and go through a little bit of data to set the table for your decision in the next agenda item. Yeah, it's on. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so where do we stand with actual building permits, right? So the first data point that we would be interested in is what's being built right now. In calendar year 23, we had 165 new single-family permits, and 58 of those were in infill locations. In calendar year 24, we had 164 building permits, 48 of those were in infill locations. We had a healthy share of renovations and additions and in both of those periods. And then you can see the average residential square footage, 2,200 square feet and just over 2,000 square feet, a little bit higher than our zoning standards for the new development. The demand side factors, this is a little bit of a repeat of Claire's presentation. You can see those. We know that there's a lot on the demand side of our need for affordable housing. The next slide shows you the supply factors, which is the one I wanted to hone in on. Remember, of all of the demand side and supply side factors, you've got very little you actually control as a city council, right? You're going to be voting only on regulations and zoning. That's the planning side of it. And obviously, we're blessed with a lot of developable land. But really, your control here is what you're doing with regulations and zoning. Outside of that, there's a very large number of factors outside of City Council's control related to affordable housing. The next slide is the income cohorts. This is a good reminder, again, from Claire on our different categories here. So if you're extremely low income, and I'll just talk about I'll take the column that's 4 persons in the family. Then you need an income of 30,000, very low income 30 to 51, low income 51 to 82, and so on down the line, so that market rate is up at that 99,000. So those are income cohorts. This is when we're analyzing it, the groups that we break all of our families into to see, okay, what groups are where and who's got something affordable or not. The next slide is the ranges. So if those groups want to buy houses, in order to buy a house, those are the ranges they're purchasing within. So market rate, right now, that's over $300,000. And extremely low, that's going to be in that 76 or lower. And these are home purchase numbers for you. The next slide is the results from the study. Again, we talked about this, so I won't belabor it, but we're seeing problems in the first-time buyer category for low income. We're seeing problems in the renter side for low income, and then you can see the workforce and market rate up there as well. The next slide is what number you actually have to be at if you're renting so that you know that it matches your percentage of income correctly. So again, I'll take the 4 persons in the household. Your income level might be about $31,000, and that means that 30% of your income would be $774. That's the amount to make the housing affordable in that lowest income group. The next slide is our statistics related to our housing department. I thought this was really important to show you as a data point because we are addressing a part of this problem, right? The part of the problem that we're addressing is what Denise does for a living every day, and that is we get about $3 million from HUD. We utilize that for 285 housing vouchers every month. The average family income there, $19,000, that's squarely within the lowest income group that we're talking about. And then you've got the average housing assistance payment. So this is the amount that we're the conduit for, that is the federal payment on housing assistance. That's that $1,066. And the average tenant in that program is paying $487. And of course, that's well within that 30% range that we saw for making that affordable. The net payment to the landlord then is about $1,500. The next slide shows you our current housing stock. We went out, we researched, okay, what's out there right now? And we didn't try to be extremely scientific about it, but we thought, okay, well, let's bring you data for you to consider. We found 9 sample houses that averaged $1,331. They had an average appraised value of $2,010. There's some software that Denise has that she can calculate an estimated monthly rental cost. That's $1,659 for the 9 sample houses, and an average price per square foot of $158. And then you can see we were trying to find a group that might average around 1,100. We got it just under that, 1,047 average square feet. And you can see the slightly lower average appraised value and estimated monthly rental cost and the average per square foot. So it's about $158, $157 for either of these 2 categories. And these are actual houses in the city of Terrell. The next slide shows you where we stand at this point, and this is where I sort of hand it off to discussion. So after the December postponement of the zoning ordinance, staff requested that P&Z considered an additional infill housing option, and that was the 1,100 square foot home with rear carport parking. P&Z took action, recommended to council an SF6 infill option of a 1,300 square foot home, again with rear carport parking. Council has the option to approve the zoning ordinance update today at this agenda, including the new infill option. And by the way, that also does include the live-work option that's already in the ordinance that you saw back in the October time frame. So you can do that tonight at the 4 o'clock agenda. That's really just up to your motion when it is that agenda item, which is the next agenda item. We would say as staff that continued work is going to be necessary on the following items. Obviously, we have a lot of new large-scale developments that come forward, and that's council's prerogative when we negotiate those development agreements to find places in them that make sense for affordable housing, and that's just a slog, right? We've seen that before. We have to work pretty darn hard to convince folks to do a voluntary annexation and work through that whole process. But that's certainly something that's a challenge that staff is willing to take on. We've had a lot of conversations here at staff level about transitioning a portion of the rental assistance program to a low-income mortgage assistance program. I wouldn't want to get folks' hopes up for that. We don't see that the federal government is willing to increase the $3 million we get every year. So it's not going to be we get to add. It's going to be, well, if you want to, you can take away from the rental and add the mortgage assistance. So that's going to be a policy decision that we will discuss over the next couple of years to see if there's any appetite to move through that process. Obviously, there's always going to be additional ideas related to affordable housing. We do expect it's a continuing conversation. It's not just sort of this one or done thing. And then, of course, there's going to be quite a few changes in state law. As we mentioned at a previous presentation, there is a gigantic amount going on in Austin related to this very same topic, and it's a little bit hard to predict what they may do. So we wanted to set the table for you, get you some data, get you some information so that you've got a little briefing on the topic, and then Mayor, I'll just hand that back to you. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, so, council, this is a workshop, so any questions you might have related to the information that was given to us so far, this is a good time. I guess for me, at what price point are we trying to target for our residents? Because maybe we just can't get there. If we go back to that slide, go backwards to,
You want the samples?
yes.
Which one are you looking for?
No, go forward. One more. Right there, yeah. So if the home price range that we're trying to target is under 100,000, I just don't know how you get there. I don't even know if that's,
I don't think, okay. If I'm not mistaken, this is the information that was given to us by that young lady at the last meeting?
this one?
There is a mix here of some of that information as well as some research that we've done on our own since then.
Okay. Now, we were talking about affordable housing. We did not say we were going to mandate housing costs. We just wanted to know, do we have affordable housing in Terrell? We found out, based on that young lady's presentation, that we don't. We are not going to be regulating, that was not our discussion. Our discussion was, we have a problem with housing in Terrell. We're not going to regulate how much a house costs, because nothing, I'm a veteran, even with the Veteran Homes program, I can't afford a home that is built in 2025. The thing is, we have identified an issue of housing. We are not going to say to a developer, we want all of these homes to be affordable. What we're saying, I think, is this is what we have. What can we do to help citizens be aware of what the housing market is? If people cannot afford to live in Terrell, they can't live in Terrell. We do have a problem with houses that are falling apart in my district. At the same time, in my district, I've got mansions out in the lower 40. The thing is, this is all fine and good, but the problem is not just housing as much as it is economics. We don't have a population that is earning the money required to buy a home. If we put a home out here, what we should say to a developer, a percentage of your home should be affordable. And we need to get away from the idea of NIMBY, not in my backyard. I don't want those we can't say that according to Texas law. You can't say not in my backyard, but we all think that. But we never said we were going to regulate the housing market to say, give us 100 homes of this amount. We're trying to say we have a problem. How do we address this problem without being overly regulatory? Carports versus platted land versus garages. What does a single family, what does me, one person live in? What does,
Yeah.
We have this idea that we want homes to look a certain way, like a homeowners association, where somebody might want to put a log cabin on a lot. All we were talking about is, and me being very, just make it very basic, I said, if you have an infill lot that is a small lot, and this family has decided they want to put a home on it, put a home on the lot that fits the lot. I don't know how you word that legally. If it's a medium-sized lot, do not put a small house on, make it the size to fit the lot, where you've got a little bit of yard, some fencing, something nice. If it's large and they want to put up a mansion, let them, but don't put the mansion on a small infill lot. That is my concern. When we talk about affordable housing, let's not get washed up in this that is presented, because we are not regulating a developer to say, we want a $150,000 home. We need to say, if you're going to put up 300 homes, give us 10% of what is affordable. What does that look like? But we don't, that's where your engineers come in and say, we don't want shoddy housing.
If I may respond to kind of what you're saying there, and I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but what's on the table today isn't regulation of home prices. You know, what's on the table is whether we're going to allow developers to make cheap homes in our community. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate to charging cheap prices for the homes or cheap rent for the homes. It's just, are we going to lower our standards so that they can make cheap buildings, make them cheaply? But as the former councilwoman pointed out, we've had, you know, cheaply made properties or homes made in our community, and that didn't translate to lower rents or to lower home prices. They were still charging a lot for poorly made or smaller homes, right? So just lowering our standards doesn't necessarily translate to affordable homes. And the other piece of that is when you do begin to, you know, reduce your standards for what we build, you wonder, because, you know, the problem we're trying to address is people in Terrell want affordable housing. They want an affordable place to live, right? The market is not, as we can see, not bearing that out currently, right? So when you build, you know, cheap housing, do you attract people from surrounding areas to come to your community to take advantage of that cheap housing? Or do your residents actually benefit from that? You know, it's kind of one of those things, like we said before, if you build it, they will come. What kind of community are we building here? Are we building one that attracts, you know, people who are looking for the cheapest place to live? You know, you've got to kind of figure out what your future looks like, you know? And but I don't know that just lowering our standards for what we build is going to translate into having affordable housing. I don't think that's the right approach.
Yeah, so, but let me say something about the presentation itself. The presentation was given so that we have all the information we need as we move forward into the discussions of what is affordable housing to each and every one of us, and what does that mean for the city of Terrell. It's not to reflect, hey, this is what you got to do, or this is what we need to regulate. These are just information for you. If you'll go to the next slide with the, go over to that one. So where we showed a deficiency in what we've got is the extremely low income, right? And we've got a huge percent of the renters and first-time buyers who cannot afford housing in the city of Terrell. But go back to the income levels for that extremely low income, right there, yeah. So we've only got $3 million that's coming from the federal government for our program currently, correct? And that number's not gonna change. I think what each and every one of us need to do when we're at National League of Cities is target getting that 3 million to 5 million. They hear it from all of the council, they hear it from the mayor, and they hear it from our staff. That might be the better way to do it, and maybe we can make a difference there. But if you're at these income levels, based on what it costs to build a new home, I don't know how you're ever gonna be able to get there.
And see, I don't think that's water we want to get into. Because that's a whole nother thing. I don't think we should lower our standards for building a home. Affordable housing should not mean less than.
Right.
It means this builder has got a heart, and maybe out of 300 houses, he'll give us 3. But the thing is, we have a population that isn't earning enough to buy a home. That means we've got to change how we introduce, now we run into the EDC problem, economic development. We need to bring in employment, or people need to have jobs to earn more, and that's not our bailiwick.
So I have a similar but different approach. So I also agree that, and I want to be careful in how I say this, because I don't want to, I think Councilman Phil Robinson, I'm going to kind of pick on you here.
Please do.
With the language of, I don't know if you said something about like the materials, or kind of what, going on along with like lowering standards. I think you can still have good standards, and they look good. They do what they're meant to have a house that doesn't leak, house where electricity works. It meets, just because it's smaller doesn't mean that it doesn't meet some individuals' need for smaller space. So I want to be careful in saying that a small home is not a good place for individuals to live in, and that there's not individuals that are seeking those places. Because not everybody has a 4-person home or a 6-person home. There's individuals that are just 2, there's individuals that are just 1. So I want to be careful about that. And then when I look at the more of the low income range, I immediately start thinking about, well, should we be thinking more about the bigger developers that have the apartment units, that have the duplexes, that can build the quadplexes for our seniors, and working with those individuals? Because my assumption is that they may be able to maintain and offer a bigger scale of that to our community members, versus if we keep chipping away at housing standards, whether they're for like single family, whether it's infill development or it's new development. What the data is telling me here is that smaller home isn't always going to translate to a lower rent price for those community members, right? So you may be trying to go out and rent a 800 square feet or 900 square feet unit, whether it's an apartment or a single-family home, versus a 16 square 100 feet home, and you're still not decreasing that amount by a lot. And at this time, we don't, our standards don't allow, our policies don't allow like 3 or 4 different individuals renting from that same home that don't have, that aren't considered family members, right? So you still have typically 2 individuals in the home that are working to produce that income, versus 3 or 4 individuals. But in maybe those apartment units, or quadplexes, duplexes, then you have that smaller space for 1 or 2 individuals to bring forth that income. So I agree with the next step section, in that the next policy that's going to come before us, the next item, isn't going to address everything that we want to address, and there's only so much that we can control, because we can't control rental prices at this time. But I think we can control how many units come into the city of Terra, what size of those units that come in through those developments. And I'm forgetting the word, that planning and the planning community uses, where, back to Donna Renee's point about, if you're working with a developer and you say, okay, X number of units need to be guaranteed to be, maybe we won't use the word affordable housing, because we all have a different opinion of what that means.
Workforce housing.
Maybe it's workforce housing, maybe it's affordable housing, but how can we have a couple of, have some units that are a lower price? And I'll have to come back to that to do, and maybe that's my way of saying, if we could have assistance from staff and looking at what those policies look like for those developments where you have, quite a bit of apartments coming to the community?
I can't wait to talk. I'm passionate about two things. I'm passionate about nursing and houses. With that being said, I heard a lot. The most important two things that I found out on that study is this slide that's showing, and when you go to the next slide, well, that one's important too, but keep going. That one, those red numbers. What can Councilwoman Thomas do to help with the problem we have with extreme low-income people, workforce people, and market rate? This is a powerful slide. We are failing the people that have extremely low income if we want to support that group. We are failing them the most. We are failing the workforce people. We are failing the market rate people. I'm okay with the very low income and the low income. We got a surplus. That's what I understood from that. And I want to talk about a couple of things. It's 4 women on this dais. We're all different sizes. But to say, because one of them is smaller, is cheap, May Ronnie, I apologize. You could be a good woman, but you're smaller. But if you got the right man looking at you and you got the right stuff in you, you are valuable. And you are more valuable when it comes to certain things because of your small size. With that being said, I don't want to use the term cheap because it's smaller. That's almost an insult. When I build a house, or any builder, if they go to Home Depot, instead of buying 400 sheets of sheetrock for $1 million house, they buy 100 sheets. It's the same material. It's the same quality. It does the same thing if a fire breaks out. It protects the children. It protects the grandmas. It don't make it cheap because it's smaller. I told the mayor this. Restaurants got it right. If I want to lose 100 pounds and I have the bypass surgery, they're going to give me a card. Or I can eat off the 12 and under menu. They understand it. We understand it in healthcare and nursing. It's certain beds for certain people. If you got a skin breakdown, an ulcer, you get a certain bed. If you're over a certain weight, you get a certain bed. If your stomach size is a certain, you get a certain size plate and portions. And I can present that card anywhere around America, and they honor that. But for some reason in our mind, in Terrell, Texas, we think if it's smaller, it's cheap. We think that the quality is less. And I resent that, because that's why. I'm not a 30-year-old anymore. I'm 52. And I only got a 1,900 square foot house, but it's me and my husband. And he works at Madex. If it wasn't for me working, we couldn't afford where we are. And guess what? My 2 kids are gone now. They live by themselves, and we use half of the house. And I wish I didn't have a 1,900 square foot house. And I wish, as I age and get into my 60s and 70s, I could go to a smaller place. And I don't want to be forced to have communal living or have to rent a room from my daughter or a friend of mine. I like my space. And I'm telling you, when I think about the elderly people, when I think about disabled people, when I think about people that just don't have what I have and can't live the way I live, they're in that highest market that we just discovered with those big red numbers, -517 and -399. And I'm gonna think about those people because they're the ones that's hurting the most in Terrell, Texas right now. And I want to have options. I was born and raised in Terrell. All my siblings were. My parents are buried here in Terrell. My kids are back in Terrell. I'm excited. And I want them to stay. And I want to have an option as I age, as I move, to stay in Terrell. But I'm telling you, with some of the decisions we have made and are making, I may not be able to stay here. You know, and if something happens to me, my husband probably ain't gonna be able to stay here. But I work and do extra because Madex is a great place, but it doesn't provide the life that we want, even in a small 1,900 square foot house. We use the living room, the bathroom, the bedroom, and the kitchen. I go in there and look in those 2 or 3 rooms to make sure nothing's moving, to make sure the walls are up. But I don't need that. I don't want it. And what I'm trying to do is to cover these people, and I'm trying to have options, and I'm trying to give them options. So my question is, what do we do for those people that this study has shown us in the red that we need to be addressing? Do we just do nothing? Because I don't want a little house, because it's less quality. A skinny woman is not a good woman. A big woman is not a good woman. A medium woman is not a good woman. It's cheap. Don't tell my husband that I ain't a good woman. He gonna say something. My husband's short. I'm not gonna say that a short man that can't be a good man. I'm gonna say something. Y'all get it? And I wanna make sure what we're doing now is not making it hard on me later. And I'm sure not gonna do nothing now that's even making it difficult for some of these people. I know that the average person that's on disability get $974. And then I heard you say this, Mayrani, we can't really determine the rent prices. You can. My son taught me this at 16. He took an economics class at Trinity Valley. And he said that his teacher told him this. You know what can affect the rent prices? It's something called supply and demand. If we get this supply up, the demand gonna be different and the rent price is gonna go down. I got 2 texts while I'm up here about somebody wanting a small. I ain't got nothing. Isn't that something? I can show you on my phone. I got text. Supply and demand. If you got 1,000 of these houses, if we start looking more like the very low income on this slide and low income, that's gonna make the numbers come down.
So
So with that being said,
Denise needs to talk.
we got to do our part. And I'm telling you, all of us grew up in a different house, and I think all of us are great people. And it don't make you bad because you didn't live in a house that was born that had a garage, because it didn't have masonry and stone on it. Those are personal likes. You pick the person you with because of your personal, but we're not gonna do that as a council. I'm not. I'm gonna look at this report and I'm gonna take care of the problem that I can and be a voice for these people, because those people can't talk. I ain't worried about paying my rent. I ain't worried about paying my mortgage. I ain't worried about it. But some of these people in this red, they worried about food. They worried about paying their $150 water bill. That's not my concern. And with that being said, what can we do to take care of these people?
okay, so let's make sure we understand what this data is. These are shortage units, right, of the survey that was done. We live in a community of 20,000 people. These are not individuals. These are, if we had the inventory, if we had 399 more homes, then we wouldn't be in the red. These are units for first-time buyers, all right? So before we beat ourselves up on something, on the data, make sure what they're saying is this community, the city of Terrell, could could use another 399 units for first-time buyers. It could use another 517 units for renters. And I've always said this, I believe it to be true, we're not a perfect community. We're gonna have areas, and you're absolutely correct, the demand will, versus what's available will even itself out. What I'm afraid of, though, is when we inject ourselves to try to force the market to do one thing or another, that's when you get in trouble. When you force this community to do, or we change policy that would help one of these categories, whether your workforce market rate or whatever. Again, the market rate, we could, for the repeat buyers, the highest number there, for the market rate, if we had another 520 units available, those would be taken up. That's what the data is showing. We have some of those houses that are being built with which ones? North Spur, and then also out there at the Arboretum Estates. That's gonna do a lot here. Once we get that thing going out here on 34, that's gonna take some of the smaller units as well. And I think those numbers are gonna work out. I agree with you. We want to help our community, but I wouldn't beat yourself up because of that number sticking out and it's red. It's red for a reason, so that you can see that we could stand our market another 399 units
And I
for
think
the first
some
time
of our
buyer.
policies made this chart look like that.
No, I'll tell you what happened with why we see this is because we weren't aggressive enough in housing and filling up or being aggressive in building homes. But we couldn't force people to come here and build. Now we are. So the market's going to take care of itself. I see that this number, and she said it as well, as we begin to build inventory, the current housing that is here, as those movers, as those owners and renters move to newer housing, those older houses are going to be becoming available to this group.
But we're
Yeah.
still short on those.
Yeah.
And this is my problem too. I don't want just the people that are in this low-income area to always just have old raggedy fixer-uppers.
Again-
If you do something with the size and the, because a house is built per square foot, period. They're not gonna ask you, how many living square feet do you have? How much is square footage of the house? That's what they wanna know. You're gonna pay that per foot for that house. And when we can have new houses being built at different sizes, even my 21-year-old, she can live in a nice property, being a telemarketer, making less than 15 an hour, and don't have to live with her mom and dad. But I'm not sure, I know she cannot afford a 1,600 square foot house, period. The bathroom's gonna be 20 by 20, the bedroom's gonna be 20 by 20, the living room's gonna be 20 by 20. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but-
It doesn't make sense.
I know.
I will not. It doesn't make sense to build a house that big for an elderly person, for a disabled person, for a kid, that regardless of what her mom and the values we put in her, they don't want to go to college.
I agree.
There's people that just cannot live a certain way, even though that's what I want.
Let me just say this real quick. I agree with what you're saying. It's just that you can't spot zone and you can't just have rules that apply to certain individuals. It's across the board. And if we make any changes to any of these ordinances, rules, the regulations of, to the housing, it applies to anybody. And the councilwoman, former councilwoman who spoke is correct, that you have people who are gonna come in here to get rich and put up less than, it's not that the quality's bad, it's just not as high quality. It's not gonna be custom
The
home.
size of the house
Right.
don't make
But it doesn't make it any better or worse. It just won't be custom home. It's just gonna be a standard home, which is fine. I mean, hey, I got raised in one of those homes. Go ahead.
So, I'm passionate about three things: putting out fires, rock and roll music, and serving my community. All right. So I ask them directly. I say, hey, what do you want to see happen? From our city government, what do you want to see happen in this community? And the housing situation is never even in the top 20 things we discuss. And I know that it's important. Maybe it's a different constituency, okay? I understand that, but I try to talk to the whole community at large. And, I do my best to do that. And I don't hear that as one of the big outcries. Now, that being the case, I think we have to be careful because I don't think we've seen any data at all that necessarily shows that making smaller homes translates to affordable homes. I just don't think we've seen that data. And, if you could show me directly, there's a correlation. You make a bunch of smaller homes, now they're going to be more affordable and lower cost. Sure, maybe that makes some sense, but I just don't think we've seen that necessarily. They end up being just as expensive or similarly expensive. I think you'd be really, really hard pressed to find a home, period, on the market that's under $200,000. It's really hard. And, I don't think that just building a bunch of smaller ones is going to mean we've got affordable housing in our community. That's my concern. And I think that when you start considering our more disadvantaged areas and we start packing smaller homes in those areas, maybe that's not the best thing for those communities because then you're not maybe giving them the best product even. I don't know that it's the best solution in terms of creating lower cost housing in our community by just allowing them to build smaller homes. I don't see the data.
I do want to add to that, although I said, we can't control, the city, to a certain extent, can't control the market rate. I do agree with supply and demand. And we do have, I think about all the new apartments that are coming in, all the new house, all the planned housing developments that are coming in, the apartments that are coming in, and also listening to the lady that was, the person that did the housing study for us, Claire, thank you, saying that regardless, like Claire, regardless of what we do.
Her name's Claire.
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 Regardless of what we do, we're never going to catch up, which doesn't mean we shouldn't make an effort to try to catch up in each of these buckets. I have a question for staff in terms of like inclusionary zoning is the word that I couldn't come up with earlier in the day, and I'll read off the description here of what inclusionary zoning is. It's a planning policy that requires or encourages developers to include a certain percentage of affordable housing units in new developments. The goal of inclusionary zoning is to increase the supply of affordable housing, reduce income segregation, and address historic patterns of racial segregation. They can apply to all developments, rental housing, owner-occupied housing, or developments of a certain size. They can be voluntary, mandatory, and include incentives for developers such as density bonuses, expedited permits and approvals, relaxed design standards, and fee waivers or reductions. The policies can vary from one market to another. For example, where higher density development is not practical, higher affordable housing requirements may not be feasible. That's just a generated definition. But and to a certain extent, I feel we do some of that with our newer developments, but I want to ask that question directly to staff. Do we have any type of inclusionary zoning? And can we have examples of what that has looked like in the past for all council? And then I would like to have staff also come forward with recommendations of what inclusionary zoning could look like.
If you go to the last PowerPoint slide. So let's just answer it this way. The very first bullet item on here says continued work is necessary for the following. Negotiating affordable housing options in large-scale new developments. So what has typically happened is a large-scale developer will come forward and they have very, very, very consistently come forward and said, we want to take market rate. They want to do market rate, they want to do market rate. Arboretum Estates, 40 and 50-foot lots, but those are going to be market rate, and they're going to be over 300,000. Same thing with North Spur, same thing with what's down there in the Woodlands, okay? You've got a lot that's come forward that said we want to build market rate. We have not in the past had a city council policy of saying, whenever we see something come forward like that, we will make sure that we ask them for XYZ related to affordable housing. The reason that I put this on this PowerPoint slide is it's not a voting item today, but we would be happy to get your feedback that says, you know what, we would like to do call it a set aside, call it whatever you like. The wording isn't going to matter. The point is the result. We discussed, and I won't name the name here, a development that came forward, and staff reached out to them, talked to them, and said, well, would you consider doing 25 tiny homes within the development? They said, yes, we like that idea. We'd like to move forward on that. Now, today, I can't tell you if that's going to be a successful negotiated annexation or it's not going to be a successful negotiated annexation. I can't predict what that developer will do. On the other hand, I would say that a very fruitful outcome of the conversation from staff's point of view would be knowing that everybody here would like to do an affordable housing option with the new large-scale developments. That could turn into a policy. That could turn into something that you specifically state in your 3-year strategic plan with a specific number that says always aim for such and such percentage in the ongoing negotiations. That's a very useful tool for staff to have to say, look, council voted on this policy, and so therefore when I'm negotiating these deals, then we have something that to lean back on to say council approved that. So that's a whole other thing that's not a voting item tonight, but we're trying to get this conversation going on affordable housing in reaction to Dr. Claire Knapp's presentation to you earlier this fall. So happy to work on it, but I would say it's against the grain of the developers that we've talked to, very much against the grain of what they're coming forward to do.
Okay.
But it's a negotiated, it's a negotiated point. So it's something that the city can say,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, and if I'll have to check, but wasn't there a time in the city of Terrell that we did have ordinances, an ordinance that developers had to have a certain percentage of houses was that ever something we've ever done?
So I think the market,
Not since I've been here anyway.
Okay, I have a question. May I ask Denise a question?
yes, Denise, if you'd come forward. You may need your laptop. No, I'm just kidding.
Based on your engagement with the community in the work that you do, what are the obstacles that you have identified in relation to what we are discussing this evening?
I would say, like you've already addressed, is the lack of units that are affordable for the income range of families that we serve, where that's where the housing assistance comes in. And even in that realm, there's still families that still can't afford some of the units because it's more than 30% of their income because the rents are elevated. So sometimes they can't even get those units, even though they're available. But if the family has a limited amount of income, then they've got to go find something a little cheaper.
Okay, and what is for a one-bedroom, or do you deal with more two-bedrooms?
We deal with
All of them?
Yeah.
What's the starting range for a one-bedroom?
A one-bedroom may be about $1,500–$1,600 a month.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
I have a question for Denise,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Yes.
We get $3 million a year. Is there anything we can do to get more other than, we're gonna talk to the legislators and do our thing at, not NLN, that's the nursing one. What is it?
National League of
Yeah.
Cities.
NLC. Is there anything else we can do to try to get more funding?
Well, Mr. Sims and I have been talking about, the voucher program also has a homeownership program. And so I've made contact with HUD because we could actually be paying mortgages to assist families that have consistent income to actually buy a house. We'd have to somehow partner with somebody to have some down payment closing costs in some situations, in many of situations. But I'm in discussion with HUD about that. So that is an option with the current funds that we have. Not saying we're gonna get any additional vouchers, but those funds could actually go toward those families that have consistent income to actually buy a home.
And did you say some of that money goes to savings? I've heard this conversation.
Well, there's another program called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, where, as the family comes on to the program, normally they're on food stamps, on TANF and all the other things. And so they get off that, they set goals for 5 years. So when they start paying rent toward, start paying their portion of rent, whatever that amount is, we have to put it into an escrow. That escrow bills, and as long as they meet those goals over the 5 years, then that money is given to them. They can use it for down payment closing cost assistance, or they could use it for whatever they want, but we want to encourage homeownership. So in my past life, that's kind of what we did. They took that money, because some people come off the program, not necessarily come off the program, but they end up with 20, 30,000, and they could actually reduce the cost of their mortgage payment and reduce the cost of the whole cost of the deal of the house. So that's a program we can also look at as well.
But
And they get to a better place off the system, you know what I mean?
Well, no, they'll still be on the program, but they will be paying more toward their rent, and we'll be paying a smaller portion, hopefully, if they have consistent income and if that income continues to increase.
So I thought eventually as they purchase and buy this home, they can get off.
If they get to a point where they're paying 100% of the mortgage or the rent, they do come off the program, yes.
Thank you.
Denise, you're our resident expert on this topic. So just as our expert,
Well, thank you.
what do you feel this council could realistically do to improve our affordable housing situation in Terrell? Do you have any ideas or anything that you've considered as being the right approach to this?
I think us tapping into the programs that are already out there, that's a start.
So federal programs.
I talked with Mike about maybe partnering with some of the banks. Maybe we have down payment closing cost assistance programs to help, even not necessarily the people that are on Section 8, but anybody in the community that may need housing assistance to be able to afford. Working with some of the realtors, working with some of the developers and the banks.
So predominantly assistance programs, and not necessarily building different types of housing?
No, it's just basically, you're reducing the cost of the house. So you're taking that
program.
money to pay for the closing costs and for the down payment on that house, which would reduce the monthly payment that they're making, which makes it more affordable for them.
Okay, but when you look around Terrell, you don't think that we could resolve some of these issues by increasing supply, or is this a supply issue of housing?
I would say there is some supply issues there.
Okay,
At one point, we had limited housing units, and so we were seeking additional landlords just for our families that are renting,
limited housing units in a certain income range? Or just in general?
just in general. But that has changed since COVID has gone, so now we have a few more units that they can choose from. Plus, with the 5-mile radius increase, then we have more units that they can choose from as well, so.
Okay, okay, thank
We
you.
extended, like, where they can go to look for a house. It's not just here in the city now. So that helped get more units available. Is that correct?
Last December, y'all voted to expand beyond the city limits of Terrell, so we went 5 miles. So that encompasses some of the other county areas, and so now they can choose areas outside of Terrell.
Okay,
Does that help?
all right, yeah. I got, Councilwoman Kelly, if you would please come back. This is a workshop, so I'm going to allow you to,
Ms. Thomas, I heard your plea, and I know you're passionate. As I said earlier, I really wanted to let her know. I know what you've done for the people. Again, you're working with the people and housing the people that the Timbers have rejected, Heather Lane have rejected, Tiffany Square had rejected, and all the others because of their background, can't pass the background check. A lot of them not making a lot of money, and they're not getting any Medicare assistance. Those are the ones, yes, you're taking care of. But again, you're taking care of them, but you're not able to maintain the housing because you're not getting enough to make it look the way you would like for it to look because they can't afford to pay you that. So your main thing is trying to keep a roof over their head and try to keep it as manageable as possibly can because those people have been rejected in other places. I mean, because that's the state law. That's not a city council problem. This is a state issue. These people with a criminal record cannot get an apartment because of their record. And I mean, it is what it is, so the council can't do anything about that. But I showed you guys the small houses in Salsa District. I have no problem with the size of it, but I'm just saying, a small house does not mean you're gonna get a $700 rent. Those days are over with. You're the only one in Terrell that's still charging $700 a rent. You know that. Nobody else is doing that, but I'm just saying, you have to look at the whole picture. And the small houses, wait 1 second, they still have to, they still have to apply for a loan, you guys. A lot of these people don't have a great credit to even get approved for a loan. So just because you build a small house does not mean that person is gonna be able to get in it. So those are a whole lot of factors in place. So what are you gonna do? Give them a house? I mean, that, you can't, because the city can't afford to lose money. So I understand what we're trying to do, or what you're trying to do, but again, you have to understand there's so many factors involved in how people can get a house. My aunt lives at Terrell Senior Terraces, 86 years old, pays over $900 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. She just renewed her lease this past Monday. That's ridiculous, but thank God she can afford to pay it. But how many of them can't? And how many of them can't? I mean, there are reasons behind it. So what I say is this is not a council issue. This is more of a personal. This is something not just you guys fix. This is a heart thing. This is the whole United States. This is just not happening in our city.
Right.
We have to understand, everybody, I mean, we got people under the bridges. It's not because the city failed them. A lot of people, it's by choice.
Ms. Kelly, I don't want
Yes.
you to think that everybody that we service as a family are criminals, drug users.
I never said everybody.
Or the people that are all, we take care of or
Mm-hmm.
poor. I don't want that to be,
Oh, I know that. I didn't say that. I said
but
most of them that have been rejected. I never said all of them
I
were.
just want to ask you this. Do you have what would be your recommendation based on your history and just what you've done in our community for like elderly people on fixed income and disability, or our children that graduate and just don't have a desire to go to college or get a trade and just want to work and be standard citizens in our community? What would you suggest as it relates to them living alone in a property that may be new, old, or what, if they wanted to do that? What would be your suggestion?
We used to have an incentive program back in Terrell years ago for first-time home buyers. That helped them. If you talk with a lot of young people, your child, she's gonna want something really nice so she can entertain. I don't care, like, again, what size it is, does not matter, but let it have some character. Don't just put a shed up and attach something to it, I'm saying, have some kind of class about itself. We are progressive. We don't want to go back in time. We need to have some type of incentive programs. And with this, like I said, people have to be able to pass background checks. People have to be able to obtain these loans in order to get all of this. You guys can't do that for them. You got to try and work with the banks. Are the banks going to do that? I mean, if that's something that you can do with the banks, then I would suggest you get with the lenders and see what they can do for the people to help people get affordable homes.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Okay.
Thank you. I do, Denise, real quick, can you please come forward? So, let's be clear on, the rental portion of our housing department versus the buying of a home. You had mentioned in your presentation that that's a takeaway from the 3 million. If we do that, if we try to assist in buying homes, that money's gonna come from the 3 million that the federal government has already authorized the city to use on an annual basis?
Yes,
So it wouldn't be an addition to. What we need is additional money. I think that's what the councilwoman's looking for, right? I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, right? Okay,
Clarify.
okay.
Yeah, is there anything we can do or need to know to try to get additional funding? Like, let's say if somebody else gets 4.2 million, like, is it based on need? Is it based on rooftops? Is it based on annual income, average income? What can we do to, that's what I meant.
You know what? And I got a question for you that she made me think of. Is there another community in Kaufman County that's getting more than $3 million for their program?
there's not another city or authority that receives $3 million in.
How do we compete with the other,
The other two just have public housing, so they actually own property, and then the assistance is only with that unit. So if
Got
that
it.
person moves out, the assistance doesn't go with them.
okay,
And we don't own properties, we just provide,
Okay.
we open market.
got it. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Question? Mike, where are we now? Well, first, is everybody comfortable with the discussion that we've had over our affordable housing? I want to thank each and every one of you for your input. This is a passionate thing, and it shows that your character, it shows your heart in wanting to do what's right for not just those that are doing well in our community, but also engaging and trying to find out how we can help those who are less fortunate, that are struggling and that are needing assistance. This was a good workshop, in my opinion.
And so, Mayor, the staff intent here was to give you a agenda item for a broad discussion. And then the other intent was to give you an opportunity to vote on something. The next agenda item is your opportunity to vote, and that's what Raylan's going to cover for you.
Council, are you comfortable looking at our planning and zoning recommendation for the next item, which is going to be discuss and consider ordinance number 3080? You have enough information to do that?
And that is going to be about what we just had to talk about.
Yes. One of I think what brought this forward was we were going to go to the planning and zoning with the recommendation of 1,600.
So let me, yeah.
Yeah, but-
May I make?
Okay,
a
go ahead.
suggestion, sir? I suggest that you change agenda items and then let us answer this question about,
All right.
well, why are we here? What exactly is in the agenda item?
All right.
So if we'll switch, then we'll.
All right, so our next item is item 4.1, discuss and consider ordinance number 3080, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Terrell, Kaufman County, Texas, amending Appendix 2 zoning ordinance of the City of Terrell as set forth in Exhibit A, attached here to and made a part of hereof for all purposes, providing for severability and providing an effective date. This is going to be handled by our downtown
Okay.
project manager.
Let me give you
Okay.
a little intro. So here's what you got. You got a giant update of the zoning ordinance. Started in the spring of '24. And as it was moving on, we received a couple of requests. One was thrift store change. Another one was facade treatments, what's on the facade of the structure. Those were duly incorporated. Y'all saw a presentation on it in October. It went to P&Z, it went to legal review. You had opportunity to vote on that in December. When it came in December, hands raised up and said, wait a minute, we wanted to also address affordable housing as part of the P&Z update, or the zoning ordinance update. Staff said, okay, we can follow direction on that. We took to the December Planning and Zoning Commission one additional change, and that's the additional change that got talked about here just a minute ago. So just for clarity, right now today, if you build SF6 new in a new development, it's a 2,000 square foot requirement for the house. Right now today, without any change by city council, if you build SF6 infill, your minimum is 1,600 square feet, okay? So right now, brand new greenfield, 2,000. Right now today, with no change by city council, it's a 1,600 in infill SF6. the option that was given to P and Z was, do you want to go down and take that 1,600 and roll that down to 1,100 square feet and only have carport? They talked about it, and the vote that came back was 1,300 square feet and carport. So, again, this is just your voting now. Whenever you vote on this, you're going to have to decide, are you comfortable with the old standard? Are you comfortable with, do you prefer what staff took to P and Z? Do you like the P and Z version of it at 1,300? That's now just your voting, okay? So everything else in the zoning ordinance is as you saw it in October and December, okay? So happy to answer any questions about the entire zoning ordinance, because the entire zoning ordinance is up for a vote, but that's the nutshell of it. In interest of time, is it okay if Raylan gives a little
Yes.
presentation here? Yeah.
Raylan, I got a question before you start, if you don't mind. The 1,600 square feet, is that living area, or is that inclusive with the garage or whatever?
That's under roof, yeah.
Under roof total?
Total.
That's an air-conditioned space.
1,600 square feet.
That's air-conditioned space.
I
Okay,
would
what does
also,
that mean? Is that like, air-conditioned space would not include the garage? Is that correct? Okay, so 1,600 living area, and then what's the addition is based on our current ordinance for garage? The minimum.
So, real quick, so
Go
your,
ahead.
as it states right now, 2,000 square feet of air-conditioned floor area. So that's going to be your living space.
Okay.
That's everything excluding the garage. And so the request moving forward would be a 1,600 square feet of air-conditioned floor area. So now you're going from 2,000 air-conditioned minus the garage. We don't care about that. So your living space is 1,600. And then P and Z was considering the 1,300.
Okay, so let's go to what it is now, 22? Okay. Is there any other requirement other than the living space? What's the other requirement?
No. So what we did is, for your infill development, the way that the ordinance reads today, it was 2,000 or 1,600 square feet air-conditioned, two-car garage, et cetera. So the recommendation that went forward to P and Z was to look at a different square footage of air-conditioned space, and that would be the entire footprint of the residence, and that you could have a carport directly behind the structure, and it would not be attached.
I read about that too, when I think about narrow, like a 50-foot lot. And see, that's why I think the mentality of shotgun. If you got a minimum square footage, it's got to be on the ground. If you don't go on the ground, it's got to be a two-story. It's just the rule.
Right.
You can't put a 2,000 square foot house if the lot is, so you got to stack it.
Right,
So
yeah.
that's why you get these big houses with no yard, because you got to get the square footage to pass our ordinance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what does that look like on a 50-foot lot to get behind the house and have a carport at the rear? And I'm sure there's some rationale.
So it's a direct drive into the carport, so it's not curved. So you have your 12-foot driveway, which is standard. You potentially have two cars that park under the carport, so now you've parked two cars, and you have at least one space recommended behind a gate. Now we've parked three cars behind screening. And then you would still have space in front of that gate for a fourth vehicle, because we were also trying to get as many of the vehicles off of the roadways, because we know also that the right-of-ways are narrow in your infill developments.
So you'd have two in the driveway. And then one behind the fence.
And two in the carport.
So they would just back straight out.
Yeah, and so what we've done is we've allowed that rear setback to be pushed back a little bit, and we're demanding, requiring additional screening in the back. So your setback is a little bit different on those infill lots. That way we can push the carport back and get as many vehicles as possible off of the right-of-way.
That's my concern. When you got a skinny lot, the house has to look long. Or you're gonna make a wider house, but it goes up. It's just to get the square footage.
Right.
It's the laws of multiplication.
Yeah.
And I get that. So that's my concern when I look at that. That's why I asked that.
Yeah.
Because you
So
just got a
it's
skinny
based on a 12-foot driveway, and so then that would be your buildable space.
And a 12-foot can park 2 cars comfortably.
Well, so once you get past the house, it doubles out.
Oh, it's a single,
Yes, single driveway, yes, and it doubles out, but that's behind your house. Then you have available parking. You have the fence, because we're requiring some screening in the front, as it goes to the carport there on the driveway.
Raylan, I also have a similar concern, because I'm thinking back to when we originally, the last time we made the square foot change to 1,600, and I'm, looking back, that was not my favorite way to pick 1,600. So I'd like to understand staff's recommendation for the 1,100 square foot for infill development.
There's no recommendation for the 1,100 square foot. That was a request by the council to look at 1,100 square foot. They did that, they took it to the P and Z. They suggested 13 rather than the 16.
Okay, so I would like to hear staff's, like, formula, how you process, based on what you see in Terrell's, like the size of infield developments. I'm sure in the city of Terrell, you probably have your standard, okay, here's maybe a handful of lots of this size, maybe here's another handful, or maybe the 70% are this size, and how do we end up as a city staff recommending this particular square foot, a particular square foot size, so it's only a 1 foot, a 1-story home versus having to go into like a 2-story home, to Councilmember Home Thomas' point about like, well, now you're having to build up to a 2nd foot. I'm sure there's some sort of like math to that, so I would like to go down that road versus like
address this
council trying to pick a number.
Well, I would caution you against trying to say that there's just going to be some exact mathematical formula. What did we do? We just looked at what has been constructed in the city of Terrell over time. You can go around and you can look at various locations in Terrell and see, hey, somebody built a fairly small house and they put a carport in the back. Now, I think various people have observed that's definitely an older building style. That's definitely a thing that's a 50s and a 60s and a 70s thing to do that you just don't see that often anymore. But what made us think, well, gosh, council's looking for policy options, let's suggest a policy option. What made us suggest that was partly what Raylan just described about the ability when you push the carport to the rear to get more cars off the street. One of our number one complaints that we hear is cars parking on the street causes a huge problem. If I have, if I push all the parking to the front of the house and I don't use any of the rear of the lot, as historically has been done in this city, if I don't use any of the rear, then I've lost parking opportunities on the private land. So this was a smaller house, accommodates more of those cars being in the back, and maybe that's a mix. Whether the perfect number is 1,600, 1,300, 1,100, 900, my comment to you is, several of you have observed a very important point here, right? And that is that even the 1,100 and the 1,300 aren't meeting what Dr. Claire Knapp was saying was our highest need with the lowest income, right? They're meeting the 2nd quintile and the 3rd quintile, right? That's what those two housing options do for you. The 1,100 is within one of those categories and so on. So when you're looking at this, I would just say, credit staff only for trying to get an option for y'all to discuss. The exact policy number, it's really going to turn out to be a policy decision by council of what is that right number? Do you like the old 1,600? Do you like the P and Z 1,300? Staff was willing to throw out there based on some council input that we would suggest an 1,100 to the Planning and Zoning Board. But at this point, you know, I think part of your decision is, do you like those measurements or some version of those measurements strictly in infill SF6? Another one is to say, well, I like it, but I don't like it in infill SF6. I like it in greenfield areas, and go try to do that in greenfield areas. You've got some policy decision here, and I think that part of that's just your feel for the community and what you think the community needs.
Let me ask a question for Raylan. So when we talk about minimums, right, on a lot, there is nothing that this council can do. Say if the lot's the minimum size lot, and you put we have an ordinance that says you put 1,100 is the minimum, but if they wanted to put 22 and stack it, they could.
And that was one comment that I was gonna make. You know, you're providing options to people
But you can't
who
force them
want
to take
these
that option.
options. Chances are, your developers are still gonna maximize the maximum square footage on the lot because they need to maximize their amount of return, whether that be in rent or that be in purchasing. So, it's something that you have to constantly keep in mind, that giving these options is really giving options to someone who has a lot and they know exactly what they want to build there. This is not going to give your infill lot developer options because he's going to max out the capacity for the lot. He's going to get the maximum square footage he can on that property because that maximizes his profit.
The other thing I'm trying to balance with what I hear from the community and thinking of those that will come to the city of Terrell and infill lots is, what Councilwoman Deborah Kelly mentioned as far as, no carport, but you have a car garage, and so then things look cleaner, they look, more progressive. But then also the feedback that I do get from community members, or sometimes you don't even have to get it from community. You just drive down the street, you see an ambulance or a fire truck just trying to get around traffic, trying to get around the bus, the stop to bus.
Yeah.
And so, is it going with no carport because now you have a garage? Or going with the carport that allows that traffic, those parked vehicles to get off the darn road. Is there a third option that we haven't discussed that would help, still have like that, the closed, something that's closed, to give, what's it called? Not the carport, but the garage, versus going with the carport?
Yeah, and Councilmember, this is where I think it's really important for, city council ownership of the policy. The question of, should that be a rear carport or should that be a rear garage? And as I've described to you before, at some point, what you want to do is just decide how you'd like to make a motion, find out if there's a second for it, and move forward with it. That's a discretionary item on your part, right? You've got the bones here that you can work with. And outside of that, there's some policy that could be just embedded in your motion.
So,
I just, one more question about the rear garage, because even when I think of huge homes, and not all homes have the garages like right as you drive up, right? Some have it on the side. What does rear mean? Does it mean it's on the side now, or is it truly you drive around and it's on the rear side? Like, is that two different types of terminology to use?
So you have rear entry, which is when you go behind your house, What we're saying is you still have a front entry garage. It's located behind the front of your house. It is still front entry because you make no turn from your driveway. So it's still a front entry garage. It's just located behind your building line.
So I got a quick question for clarity purposes. At the 1,600 level, which is our current square footage, right? How many homes are coming in at 1,600 square feet? Do we know? Is that a high number, a low number, medium?
Well, our average that you saw earlier, that we did a research just in the last year, was 2,000 square feet.
So even
We
though,
had 165 homes, 48 of them were infield, and they're averaging 2,000 square foot.
so I guess what I'm trying to get to the council is, we could drop it down to 1,000, but if the numbers don't work for you to build that house and be able to sell it and make a profit on it, you're not gonna build it. Just wanted you to be mindful of that. And the planning and zoning looked at it and determined that 1,300 was the low number, but we can't force the builder to build a 1,300 square foot home, if you understand.
I'm not saying to a developer that's gonna be putting up what I call an HOA, 300 homes. I'm not saying that they have limiting them. I know they're gonna get the maximum house on the lots that they put in that. I'm talking about, in my district, I've got some empty lots that belong to families and they wanna build a house. And they're gonna get their builder to build a house. I would like them, if it's a small lot, 50 square feet, is that what it's called? Okay, that they get to put 1,100 square feet on there. At the same time, we've got a parking issue on Mineral Wells. Well, South Terrell, in Terrell, we have a parking issue. People park on the street because they cannot get the number of people who own a car in the house, in the street, off, in the yard. So you got 3 cars in the driveway, one skirting on the grass, and then you got 2 other cars in the street, and nobody can get around. That's just the way it is. So I'm concerned about not the HOA kind of housing, where the developers are gonna do what they do, but if this family wants to put a house on there, give them the opportunity to make it what they can afford with a carport garage thing, that they can get the 4 cars off the street.
Could we do that in a development agreement? Do we have the flexibility to do that in a development agreement? And maybe we don't need to do anything here.
It's just 2 different topics. One is in your zoning ordinance. All you're contemplating tonight is whether or not you want to do that in SF6 infill. That's all that's on the agenda
Okay,
tonight.
all right.
If you want to proceed and say, hey, by the way, negotiate some of those for us because we like those, well, that's just direction from council, and we'll hear it and we'll know it. Yeah.
So for and what I'm getting at, in her instance, where there's a family that owns the lot, and it's not a developer, and they're not doing it for profit, they're just trying to build a home that they can live in, to remain off the street, we could work with them.
You
Yes.
could provide another option.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. The only hesitation you hear from staff in answering that question is, there's an unknown embedded in what you just said. And it's just y'all's judgment, right? Your judgment goes like this. You provide that option. It is always an option. In some cases, it will be taken advantage of by just folks who want to, they live here, they've owned that lot for years, they want to build a house on it, and that's the small scale decision. And I think you're going to end up being happy with those. Then you're going to have some number of people who just say, oh, look what the zoning has allowed you to do in Terrell now. I'm going to go buy 10 of those, and I'm going to build some houses on it.
Right.
The balance that you get in the real world is exactly the judgment call you guys need to make.
Okay.
That's the judgment call right there in a nutshell. How many will be this, that you end up being happy with it, and how many will be something that a developer from outside the community comes and picks up? That's a judgment call at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have
Everybody.
a small frustration to express. I was under the impression today that we were going to move the affordable housing workshop to a different date, and this is going to be fully about all of our zoning ordinances today. Now we've spent, an hour and 45 minutes on just the residential zoning ordinance, and we haven't discussed any other ordinances that were of much greater importance to me. And now we have 15 minutes left to discuss the rest of those ordinances. I feel like we could have maybe managed our time a little differently, or maybe done something differently with this meeting. But regardless, just with regard to this piece, I want to say that minimums are minimums for a reason. Minimum wage means we would pay you less if we could, but we can't, right? And I think that what happens with minimums sometimes, you're right. Maybe typically people are building 2,000 square foot lots, right? Maybe they are, but there'll be the circumstances when they'll go, okay, I can fit more properties on this lot. I can squeeze more in if you're letting me do it. I know developers who would do that personally. I know them, that's not unheard of. It potentially can happen. And I think that it's not going to meet any needs because like we've said before in this conversation, we haven't shown that smaller houses equals more affordable houses. But if we could move to another topic within our ordinances discussion, I think that would be beneficial if we could get to some other aspects of, and to me, the fact that we're voting on all of this as a whole right now, after just discussing one minute aspect of it, I don't think it's appropriate.
This,
But we don't have to.
this was the big issue for some of the council members. That's why we've been doing this for, I don't know, when we started this affordable housing conversation, it's been 2 years. A&M, right? It's been at least 2 years. So we need to have this conversation and we need to move forward. We also need to address your issue, which I know is more the commercial side of it. Is it not addressed in this ordinance?
Yeah, no, all of the other amendments that you've seen, nothing else has changed. So if there are other sections that you want to go over, we absolutely
Well,
can.
let's go over real quick and then if we need to take more time, we can. But we absolutely need to get to the that portion of the ordinance that you're interested in, which is the commercial. Okay, go ahead.
So with regard to
Is your mic on?
With regard to the masonry facade situation, we embedded a few other items that can be a potential property owner can do in lieu of doing the masonry facade. Can you refresh our memory on what those are?
Sure. That section.
Page 90.
So what you have is section 37.4, which is the alternative exterior materials. And what we've said is just reiterated, everything in the dark shading was existing. Building official may approve an alternative exterior construction such that it's sufficiently durable and fire weather resistant. The proposed building materials and arrangement of materials provide consistency with the appearance, and proposed building materials create an appearance that associates a time, place, event, or an activity with the development in that manner. So B is all alternative material requests shall also include two of the following. So if you're making this request,
So if you're not putting stucco on your facade, you can do this instead?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, so if you're making a request for an ulterior or an alternative material, we're asking that you also include two of the following upgrades, whether that be, these are examples, gabled entry cover, decorative woodwork, architectural metals, and that's the list. And the way that it was explained and the way that it would actually work in the real world is, now this is a toolbox that the building official and also staff within municipal development, now we're having conversations with people about, the look and feel of their building. Absolutely, we can get the alternative material approved. A few check boxes by the building official. You saw it happen with the store on Highway 34. So something as simple as increasing some of the landscaping, adding a few more trees. There's some things that we can now talk to these tenants or property owners with.
So we're just providing some flexibility, some other options, and they're still improving the building, make it a little nicer, but not having to do such an expensive repair necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay. And we feel confident that most of these options here are, you know, I just don't want us to get into a situation where we're kind of, you know, we're still putting this business owner in a bad situation. by
Here's what
having
I'll
to do
say.
A bunch of
that
additional things.
What
that
we included
possibly-
in this list is what we see these tenants and property owners are adding to these buildings anyway. Even on the stucco, they're doing shutters, they're doing window treatments, they're putting nicer doors. And now we're giving them credit for that. We're thanking them. It's part of, without saying so, they're doing this anyway.
Okay.
This is how they're still improving their property. So we started with that list. What do we see that our tenants are adding to our property that, you know, they're really not getting credit
I
for?
like it, okay.
So,
Now-
And-
Thanks,
and
Raylan.
We can always tweak it and improve it at any time, right?
if we see a
Okay.
whole lot of requests for something, we'll bring back an item.
Okay.
Now, aside from, are there any additional costs from what we have in place right now? Are there any additional costs that the applicant would incur to say, I want to go these alternate routes? No. On the form, is there a form that applicants, this is what I would like to see, the form that we have that applicants complete, that there is already for lack of better words, a suggestion, a space where they can see, oh, there's an alternate. Because what I feel happens sometimes, or what I read or get communicated, is, oh, these are the city's ordinances. So they don't even have a clue of there's an option, because we didn't tell them outright there's an option. So now we're all hearing, you know, these negative stories about the city of
I think it goes
Carroll.
back to, we as staff will do a much better job at communicating the availability in having these meetings and making sure that our front desk receptionists are, you know, they
enforcement
definitely know.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just, that's things that we'll handle in-house, for sure.
Good? Anyone?
I like it, I can get behind that.
Anyone else?
So the
Okay.
only, the ordinance as a whole, we're asking that you consider, and so what you have in your packet is the P and Z recommendation, not to beat the dead horse, but you do have the P and Z recommendation of the 1,300 for the infill lot development in SF6, and so my only request is if you're wanting to change that number, we may want
Would
to,
like to change the number.
so we will just need to make that part of the motion.
1,100?
And this is what I was looking at, like, after we had this meeting December, this is what how did that number come about? Just based on our communication as a
We
council?
started with a small square
Okay.
footage, what could fit, how can we do the carport? We just looked at some different options, yeah.
And then, you verbalized that to the P and Z?
P and Z, yes.
And then they said, okay, we hear what council's saying, but we gonna do that, we recommend that, that's how that happened?
Yes, ma'am, yeah.
Okay.
So it was,
But
they
is-
felt
Make
like
sure I
they in
understand
between.
the process and how that happened.
Is that not uncommon for, or is it common for things to go before the P and Z and then they make some adjustments?
Absolutely.
Okay,
They're a robust group.
okay.
I would like to propose that I don't understand the necessity of having two different requirements necessarily for these, you know, for new developments. I would actually like to raise what we're doing currently infill and just make the external lots the same. So what if they were both, you know, 18 or something like that? So they're both the same requirement. It seems a little discriminatory to me to give one to the other, one to one to the other. But I'm not in favor of reducing the size, the square footage.
I
But,
am, because when you're developing, if you tell me to make every lot, first I got $1 billion to do